In the summer of 2008, Orlando, Florida shimmered under relentless sun, its quiet neighborhoods hiding stories behind drawn blinds. Among them lived Caylee Anthony, a 22-year-old woman with an easy smile living with her parents and her 2-year-old daughter, Caylee Marie Anthony. To neighbors, they were an ordinary family. Caylee's laughter filled the yard, and Caylee appeared the picture of young motherhood. Yet beneath that suburban calm, secrets coiled tightly. Arguments between Caylee and her mother Cindy echoed late into the night. Caylee seemed restless, trapped between motherhood and the desire for freedom. But no one imagined that within weeks, the same neighborhood would become the center of America's most disturbing mystery, a case that would define a generation of true crime obsession and question the very nature of truth itself. The nightmare began quietly, almost by accident. On July 15, 2008, Cindy Anthony dialed 911, her voice trembling as she reported her granddaughter missing. The words, "My daughter's car smells like there's been a dead body in it," sent chills through the dispatcher. Shockingly, Caylee had not reported Caylee missing for 31 days. Instead, she offered vague explanations about work trips and babysitters. As detectives pressed her for answers, her calmness felt unnatural, rehearsed. Friends were stunned. How could a mother stay silent for a month? Police began to sense something deeply wrong. The story unraveled quickly, and Caylee's web of lies started to tighten around her. What began as a missing child report was spiraling into a dark investigation that would grip the nation for years, turning a young woman into one of America's most infamous figures. Detectives soon confronted Caylee about her inconsistencies. She insisted she worked at Universal Studios and led them through hallways confidently until, cornered, she admitted she didn't work there at all. The realization hit the officers like a wave. Every story she told, every job, every friend, every detail seemed fabricated. The mysterious Zanny the nanny who supposedly took Caylee turned out to be fictional. Investigators found themselves chasing ghosts. The more Caylee spoke, the deeper her lies ran. Detectives began treating her less like a grieving mother and more like a suspect. Yet even then she smiled, calm under questioning. That composure unnerved everyone in the room. Outside media began circling. Orlando was about to become the epicenter of a media storm unlike anything the city had ever seen. Inside the Anthony home, chaos was brewing. George and Cindy were torn between love and disbelief. Their daughter was being accused of unimaginable things, yet their granddaughter was gone without a trace. George appeared broken, withdrawn, while Cindy oscillated between fury and protection. The family's private pain spilled into public view, captured by cameras stationed outside their house day and night. Reporters dissected every gesture, every word. Strangers screamed, "Baby killer!" as Caylee was escorted to police cars. America's obsession had begun. This was no longer just a missing person case. It was theater, tragedy, and scandal rolled into one. The lines between grief and guilt blurred as the Anthony's family drama became a national spectacle. Caylee clung to her story about Zanny the nanny, claiming the babysitter had kidnapped Caylee. Detectives followed the lead desperately, tracing apartments, phone numbers, and alleged addresses, each one a dead end. Zanny didn't exist. Investigators realized the entire narrative had been invented. It wasn't just deception, it was precision manipulation. Still, Caylee maintained the illusion with astonishing confidence, even under pressure. When surveillance footage surfaced of her partying at clubs during the month Caylee was missing, the public's sympathy evaporated. Smiling, dancing, and competing in a hot body contest, she appeared utterly carefree. For many, that image cemented her guilt long before a trial began. America's sweetheart mother had transformed into the nation's villain overnight. Then came the discovery that shattered any remaining hope. On December 11, 2008, a utility worker stumbled upon a small skull in a wooded area less than half a mile from the Anthony home. The remains of Caylee Marie Anthony lay inside a garbage bag wrapped with duct tape. Detectives stood in grim silence as forensic teams moved in. The smell of decay confirmed what everyone feared. The child's life had ended violently, and the world demanded answers. Reporters swarmed the site, helicopters hovered above, and candles were lit across the nation. The Anthony family's worst nightmare had become every parent's horror story. From that moment on, the case transformed from mystery to murder. The search for truth was about to become a war inside a courtroom. The evidence that followed painted a chilling picture. Forensic experts detected chloroform residue inside Caylee's car trunk, along with hair strands consistent with Caylee's and an odor of decomposition. Internet searches found terms like how to make chloroform and neck breaking on the family computer. Pieces of duct tape matched those found at the scene, with traces of a heart-shaped sticker, the same kind Caylee used for crafts. Each discovery deepened the suspicion that Caylee's death had not been accidental. But while the science told one story, Caylee remained impassive, her face unreadable. Prosecutors began crafting their narrative, a young mother who longed for freedom, who chose to eliminate the burden of motherhood at any cost. Two figures soon took center stage in this unfolding drama: Prosecutor Jeff Ashton and defense attorney Jose Baez. Ashton, sharp and confident, believed in cold, hard evidence. Baez, charismatic and bold, played the emotional game. Their clash would define one of the most watched trials in history. Cameras filled the courtroom, capturing every tear, every smirk, every whispered objection. The air felt electric, heavy with judgment. To the prosecution, this was a clear-cut case of murder. To the defense, it was a tragic misunderstanding spun into hysteria by the media. And for the public, it was something darker, a reflection of a society obsessed with punishment and spectacle. The trial officially began in May 2011, and from the moment Caylee walked in, all eyes were on her. Dressed modestly, hair pulled back, she looked more fragile than the party girl tabloids had painted. Protesters outside the courthouse shouted justice for Caylee, while others debated whether she could truly be guilty beyond reasonable doubt. News networks broadcast the trial live daily, transforming it into a national event. Every testimony, every exhibit, every flicker of emotion became breaking news. It was no longer just about evidence, it was about perception. Was Caylee a murderer or a misunderstood young mother caught in a storm too large to survive? The prosecution laid out a narrative that chilled the nation. They argued that Caylee suffocated Caylee with chloroform and duct tape, then disposed of the body in nearby woods. Motive: freedom. They showed photos of Caylee's party nights, her flirtations, her carefree smiles, claiming she wanted a life without responsibility. They painted her as narcissistic and deceitful, a liar who cared more about attention than her child. For weeks, jurors listened as forensic experts and friends testified. The courtroom grew heavy with grief and anger. Every detail, from the duct tape to the car smell, became a weapon against Caylee. America's most hated mother sat stone-faced as the world demanded justice for her daughter. Then came the defense's turn, and Baez dropped a bombshell. In his opening statement, he claimed Caylee's death was a tragic accident. According to him, the toddler had drowned in the family's pool, and Caylee's father, George Anthony, panicked and helped hide the body. Baez argued that Caylee had lived in an environment of abuse and fear, trained to lie and conceal. The accusation shattered the Anthony family image. George vehemently denied the claims, breaking down on the stand. The courtroom gasped. For the first time, the narrative shifted from murder to cover-up, from guilt to manipulation. The story had become more than a trial. It was psychological warfare. Expert witnesses followed one after another. Forensic scientists debated air sample analysis. Neighbors recalled strange smells near the Anthony car. Friends testified about Caylee's calmness after Caylee disappeared. The defense attacked every piece of evidence as unreliable, every witness as flawed. The prosecution countered with data, timelines, and logic. The jury sat motionless, absorbing contradictions. Outside, Americans argued on social media, television, and street corners. Everyone had an opinion, but no one had certainty. The truth seemed to twist daily, reshaping itself under the weight of speculation. The Caylee Anthony trial had become less about facts and more about belief, what people wanted to see in the face of horror. Arguments reached fever pitch over key pieces of evidence. The duct tape. Did it cover Caylee's mouth before death or after as a way to contain odor? The car trunk. Was the smell truly decomposition or something else? Forensic chemists clashed, each confident in their science. Even the internet searches sparked debate. Who had made them and when? It was a case where evidence was abundant, yet inconclusive. Every clue seemed to point toward guilt, yet every conclusion was shadowed by doubt. The media's sensationalism only deepened confusion. Truth and theater became indistinguishable. As the trial neared its end, no one knew what to expect. Through it all, Caylee remained an enigma. Some days she cried softly, other days she appeared detached, staring blankly ahead. When prosecutors displayed photos of Caylee's remains, she turned away, trembling. But critics accused her of performance, not pain. To some jurors, her demeanor was unsettling. To others, it hinted at trauma. Her silence became her loudest statement. The public dissected every expression, searching for guilt in her face. In the court of public opinion, Caylee had already been convicted. Yet inside that courtroom, justice would depend not on emotion, but on the narrow definition of reasonable doubt. The closing arguments were fiery. Ashton spoke with precision, replaying Caylee's lies, pointing to her internet searches and pleading for justice for a defenseless child. Baez countered with passion, painting Caylee as a victim of lifelong deceit and manipulation. He reminded the jury that there was no clear evidence showing how Caylee died, only theories. His voice cracked as he described a terrified young woman whose mistakes had spiraled beyond control. The jury listened in silence, the weight of the nation pressing upon their shoulders. When the courtroom fell quiet, all that remained was tension. Raw, suffocating, and absolute. Outside, the courthouse turned into a carnival of emotion. Crowds held signs reading "Justice for Caylee" and "Baby Killer." Reporters stood on live broadcasts for hours, speculating endlessly. Candlelight vigils flickered across America, strangers mourning a child they never knew. The jury deliberated for 10 hours, but for those waiting outside, it felt like a lifetime. Caylee sat motionless, head bowed, whispering prayers. Her parents sat apart, broken and silent. The world held its breath, waiting for a verdict that would either bring closure or chaos. No matter the outcome, history was about to be made in that Orlando courtroom. When the verdict finally came, the world stopped. Not guilty on first-degree murder, not guilty on aggravated manslaughter, only guilty on 4 counts of lying to police. Gasps filled the courtroom. Outside, screams erupted. Reporters rushed to deliver breaking news as tears and outrage spread across the crowd. To millions, it felt like justice had died alongside Caylee. Caylee Anthony broke into tears, embracing her attorney. The jurors later said the evidence simply didn't meet the threshold of guilt. But for the public, the verdict was unforgivable. America had witnessed one of the most polarizing trials in modern history, and no one felt peace. Caylee was released shortly after disappearing into secrecy. Her name became synonymous with scandal and deception. Protesters followed her for years, shouting "Baby Killer" whenever she appeared. She gave few interviews, mostly living in hiding. Her parents drifted apart, forever scarred by the trial's aftermath. Meanwhile, TV networks cashed in with documentaries, books, and debates. The case had changed true crime forever, transforming real tragedy into entertainment. It exposed the dark hunger of the public to dissect, blame, and sensationalize. And at the heart of it all was a little girl whose smile had been lost in the noise. Today, more than a decade later, the Caylee Anthony trial remains a haunting reminder of how truth can fracture under pressure. Some still believe Caylee was guilty and escaped justice. Others think she was a flawed young woman, destroyed by her own lies in a merciless media machine. The question of what really happened to Caylee Anthony may never be answered, but her memory endures as a symbol of innocence lost amid chaos. In the end, the case wasn't just about one child's death. It was about America's reflection in the mirror of tragedy. And the image staring back was unsettlingly human, fragile, and forever scarred.